The first thing I noticed was the echo. Westport International swallowed sound and returned it as something thinner, a kind of polite hush that made everyone look like they belonged more than I did. I stood with my carry-on upright beside my calf, boarding pass wallet already in my hand, out of habit, even though my daughter had insisted she'd handled everything. "Mom," Lily said, turning to me without really seeing me. "I must have left your ticket at the house." Her mouth tried on a sympathetic tilt. Her eyes were already sliding toward the security line. Connor, her husband, checked his watch like he was timing a marathon he hadn't trained for. Behind them, Mia scrolled on her phone, and Tessa traced one sneaker toe along the grout between floor tiles as if it formed a secret map. "I'll pull up the confirmation," I said, "because that's what teachers do when children are certain of the wrong thing. We produce the paper." "You forwarded it, remember?" "There isn't one," Mom Lily answered, not unkindly. "Just with that professional patience she uses on people in waiting rooms. We booked everything together so you wouldn't have to fuss with logins. You know how technology makes you tense." My mouth tasted like the coffee I hadn't finished. "I gave you my passport weeks ago. And now there's a snag," Connor said, a sigh pinned to his words. "Listen, Eleanor, we should get the kids through security. We'll sort it from Paris and add you to the itinerary there. Couple days tops." A pre-boarding chime purred through the terminal. "Group A, please proceed to gate 17. Connor's shoulders lifted a fraction. "I'll buy a new ticket," I said, pulling out the card I reserved for emergencies, the one I used last month when the water heater coughed and died. "I can be on the next flight. I'll meet you." Lily put a hand on my wrist. Not affection exactly, more like a careful nudge. "There are no seats today," we checked. "And the hotel. The package deal makes it complicated." Mia finally looked up. Tessa did too. For a second I saw both girls as they'd been at 6 and 8 curls damp after bath time, eyes trusting as planets. Then Connor guided them forward with a light pressure between their shoulder blades. "I'll text you when we land," Lily called over her shoulder, kindness performed at a distance. I watched my family disappear behind the frosted glass panels, with the little airplane decals, the kind they put at child height. The space I occupied grew very quiet. People rushed around me with their ordinary urgencies, and I understood quite suddenly that I would not be boarding any plane today. The taxi home smelled faintly of pine cleaner and someone else's cologne. Outside the window, the city tugged at its coat and pretended not to notice me. I had pulled $35,000 from my retirement accounts for this trip because Lily said paying up front got us a rate we'd never see again. She had shown me glossy photos of a villa with pale shutters and a terrace where bougainvillea spilled down like laughter. "A memory for the girls," she'd said. "A celebration. It is a particular kind of grief to realize the party was never meant for you." My house, a tidy 2-bedroom I've kept equal parts museum and refuge since Byron died, met me with cool air and the familiar click of the deadbolt when I turned it. I set my suitcase in the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The quilt lapped at my knees like shallow water. For several minutes I listened to the house breathe the faint hum of the refrigerator, the slow tick of the clock in the hall. Then I saw it. On my nightstand where last night Lily had perched cross-legged to double-check the packing list, lay her tablet, slim rose gold, a hairline scratch across the corner like a healed scar. I told myself I was only going to see if there was a confirmation tucked somewhere I could use. The screen woke at a touch. No password, no biometric scan. Lily has always trusted her devices the way she trusts automatic doors. They open because it's her. The email app lifted like a curtain and I walked through. The first thread had a subject line so cheerful it could have worn confetti. Summer Europe, final details. There were months of messages between Lily and Connor. Receipts, rate breakdowns, a spreadsheet with colors I recognized from the PTA committee days, the ones Lily used for bake sale tallies, green for received, yellow for pending. In one column, my name, E. Hart, next to a line item 35,000 wired. Handling bookings for Mom, less stress. Farther down, a different tone bled through. C. We can't take her. Logistics are messy if she's in the system. L. Then we misplaced the ticket. Makes more sense than passport. She can't argue passport at check-in. C. She'll ask for email. L. I'll say it went to your office address. She hates calling customer service. She won't make a scene. A pulsing gray dot arrived at the top new email. From Connor Bloom to Lily Bloom, subject done. Situation handled. She headed home. Did you grab your tablet? Has everything. My hand went very still over the glass. I let out a sound that startled me with its calmness. What a measured thing anger can be when it has documentation. I took screenshots. Not frantic, not greedy, just systematic, as though I were assembling a classroom packet. The thread, the spreadsheet. A folder named Family Support Tracking that opened into a cold ledger of names. Aunt Marion, $22K bridge loan. Uncle Ben, $18K medical copay. Cousin Ruth, $15K group booking pricing. Each with a checkmark under cleared and a tiny note under approach in person. emphasized stress. Another message popped in curt as a jot on a post-it left the tablet. We'll wipe when we're in the air. She won't find anything. They say the heart is a fist. Mine unfolded. I set the tablet back exactly where it had been and picked up my phone. I scrolled past the people I call for recipes and birthday reminders and snow day gossip, and I tapped a number I hadn't used in years. Cole and Ashby, a receptionist, answered. How may I direct? Adrian Cole, I said. This is Eleanor Hart. I used to be Eleanor Winters, Byron Hart's widow. A pause, a click, and then his voice came through, older at the edges, but unmistakable. Eleanor. It's been too long. I need help, I said, right now, before a tablet in my house forgets everything it knows. Bring it, he said. Don't open anything else. We'll preserve what's there. I put on the navy cardigan I wear to school concerts and funerals. I slid the tablet into a tote the color of wet slate. The drive downtown took 19 minutes. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rear view, a woman whose face had learned new geography's lines I hadn't named, a steadiness I hadn't needed until now. Adrian's office sat on the corner of an old brick building whose stair rail still remembered every hand that had gripped it hard. He met me at the door. He'd cut his hair shorter, the silver suited him. His eyes, the same clear gray as the river that splits this city, let me sit before they asked questions. Priya, he called, and a woman with a tight ponytail and the kind of calm that only comes from long days in rooms with humming machines joined us. This is Ms. Hart. We need a full image, all artifacts, and we need it yesterday. We sign things. Priya slid the tablet into a cradle attached to a box that bore stickers in languages I didn't read. Progress bars assembled themselves in sturdy, unhurried blocks. A printer sighed out a label with my name and a string of numbers that looked like coordinates. Adrian poured tea into a heavy ceramic mug. Tell me what you know, he said. I told him the airport story first because it felt like the polite way in. He listened without interrupting the way good teachers do when a child is finally speaking. I told him about the wire, about the spreadsheet, about the ledger with relatives' names sorted into a system that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with extraction. I kept my voice even. I didn't cry. I have always saved that for behind closed doors. He nodded at intervals as if placing pins on a map. Eleanor, what you're describing isn't a misunderstanding. It's fraud. And given your age, there's an additional layer the law recognizes: financial exploitation. The word age reached for me and didn't quite land. I retired last year, I said, as though that clarified an objection I didn't know how to make. Legal definitions are blunt tools, he said gently. You're not a label, you're a client. We'll treat you as such. Priya re-entered with a cataloger's economy of motion. We've got a full image, she said. Metadata intact, deleted items queued for carve. There's a nested drive, likely cloud sync. I'm scraping that now. Anything jump out? Adrian asked. A color-coded workbook that does not belong in a family email, she said, dry as paper. Also messages that suggest prior successes. Someone's proud of their process. I could feel the shape of my life shifting under the chair, not collapsing, rearranging into a pattern that made terrible, undeniable sense. Connor's name lit my phone again, this time as a text to the family thread Lily had titled Summer Magic. Landing soon. Paris looks gorgeous from the window. We'll call tonight. Don't worry, Mom, we're on it. Adrian didn't ask to see it. He didn't need to. He set the mug within reach. Here's what happens now, he said. Steady, practical. Priya preserves everything. We create a clean copy for analysis and lock the original behind chain of custody. We notify no one. We do not tip a single domino until we've mapped the line, and we start a ledger of our own names, dates, amounts, not for sentiment, for court. Or, he slid a thin folder toward me. My name appeared on the tab in his neat print, inside a retainer agreement weighted with its tidy blanks. I read every line because reading is how I have always kept myself from breaking. In the lab room, a progress bar reached the end of itself and turned green. Priya peeled a label from its backing and pressed it to a silver drive, hard Exhibit A. Preserved, she said. I signed the last page and set the pen down carefully. The room felt different. Not larger, not smaller, just truer. Outside, afternoon sun angled between buildings and found the dust in the air. I watched it turn ordinary particles to gold for one suspended breath, then I stood. Thank you, I said to Adrian, to Priya, to the quiet rooms that had made unbelieving unnecessary. I left the tablet in their custody and walked back into a city that had not changed at all. Adrian kept the folder open between us like a door that would not swing shut. Priya arranged the drives along the edge of the table in a tidy procession, each with a white label and my name like a small deliberate anthem, Hard Exhibit, ABC. The room hummed with machines in a concentration that felt almost tender. Start here, Priya said, turning the tablet's mirror onto a monitor. Color filled the screen, Lily's cheerful subject lines, Connor's clipped replies spreadsheets dressed in school committee colors. Priya tapped through cells that were mercilessly neat. Family support. Tracking looked nothing like support at all. It was accounting amount stories assigned in advance, dates of approach dates cleared. My name was just one line among many. Adrian slid a legal pad toward me. If any name surprises you, say it, once he said. Priya will flag it. Aunt Marion, I said when I saw her 22,000. She'd sold her porch swing last spring and laughed about being practical. Uncle Ben's 18,000 sat under medical copay. Cousin Ruth's 15,000 wore group booking pricing like a paper crown. My own 35,000 came with polite quotation marks handling bookings for mom less stress. Priya moved to a new window. There's a folder that doesn't belong, she said matter-of-factly. Bank statements rolled into view logos from institutions I'd only read about in newspaper investigations, not in family email. One set bore the name of a subsidiary I didn't recognize. Another started in a place better known for white beaches and secrecy than anything to do with our town. Walk me through the flow, Adrian said. Deposits matched the ledger, Priya answered, unrolling dates and sums that linked like zippered teeth. Then funds hopped to a domestic LLC, then to an entity housed here. She circled a string of initials and then washed back in as Investor Capital to a development company I'm seeing in county records. Adrian's pencil paused. Which development company? Bloom and Pike Urban Partners, Priya said. Registered manager Connor Bloom. A clock somewhere counted a single second very loudly. The name lay on the screen in ordinary font as if it were a grocery list. I felt something in me move 1 inch toward colder ground. Priya hesitated. There's more. A text thread cached from the tablet's backup. Connor to a contact saved as VC references to Riverside Quarter and a meeting at Hawthorne Club. There's a lot of talk about moving paper before end of quarter. Adrian leaned closer. Bin VC. The texts were the kind of terse men write when they believe they are immune to consequences. Wire on Monday, keep it clean, and later we're tight. Need the family round now, can smooth with Europe optics. One message pinned my daughter's name to an errand L, will manage the elder piece. She's good at soft pitches. I looked at the blue bubble and read my daughter down to a single letter. Who is VC? I asked, though the answer was already forming. Adrian rubbed the bridge of his nose. A name you shouldn't have to know. Tell me anyway. He exhaled. Vincent Caravelli. He's been rumored at the margins of legitimate development for years. Nightclubs, parking structures, seasonal pop-ups that never file taxes. Folks like him don't build. They launder, no convictions. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred into blocks. The office window framed a narrow slice of sky that had gone the pale silver that makes roofs look thoughtful. Priya's keystrokes sounded like rain in another room. Bring in Helena, Adrian said, and the receptionist's voice on the intercom was already answering. He looked back to me. She's a former federal investigator. She knows where these trails run. Helena Ruiz arrived with a canvas bag and a gaze that measured without hardening. She set a slim laptop beside Priya's monitor, clicked something open, and pulled county records onto the table as if the town itself had gone transparent. Parcels highlighted in thin green. Mortgage filings that read like a story told out of order. The Riverside Quarter project has 4 parcels with loans layered like pastry, she said, pointing. 2 are already in default behind the scenes. The notices haven't hit the public docket. This LLC a tap feeds cash in just before each deadline. Then it empties itself. Mr. Bloom is either remarkably unlucky or very busy. She glanced at me not unkindly. I'm sorry you're learning your son-in-law's business from my map. Maps are better than rumors, I said. Helena's mouth twitched, almost a smile. She brought up a second screen the Hawthorne Club's membership list, a glossy roll of names I knew from Charity Gala pages. Caravelli uses intermediaries, she continued. But if Connor's meeting him there, he isn't just a bystander. Adrian closed his eyes for an instant, not in prayer, but in the steadying way a runner does at a mile marker. When he opened them, he looked exactly like the man who had placed the heavy mug of tea in front of me, present pragmatic. We're reporting this. We is doing a lot of work, Helena said, but her tone carried consent. I can make a call. My phone vibrated against the tabletop. FaceTime from Lily. The name bright with a little heart she'd added years ago when such things still felt uncomplicated. I answered. The Eiffel Tower did not try to be incidental in the background. It insisted. Lily's hair had the careful mess of an influencer on vacation. Connor leaned in from frame-right, grin-fixed shades on his head. The girls were there too, Mia's smile glued on Tessa's drifting like a flag in light wind. Mom, how are you? Lily's voice wore concern like a new scarf. I'm fine, I said. How is Paris? Magical. We've been on the phone all morning with the airline. She rolled her eyes in an exaggerated way that might have been for the girls' benefit. They're being ridiculous about issuing a replacement ticket. Security this, verification that. We're not giving up. There's a cafe below the apartment with pastries the size of bowling balls, Connor added cheerfully. You'd love it, Eleanor. Tessa's face tilted toward the camera. For a heartbeat, our eyes met her gaze, quick, intelligent. She looked away as if that were the choreography adults required. "Don't spend your time worrying about me," I said. "Enjoy where you are." "We wish you were here," Lily said, which was a sentence with too many halves. We hung up. The quiet in the office returned like a blanket shaken out and let fall. "You did well," Adrian said, and Helena nodded in agreement as if we were practicing a kind of stillness that has to be learned. The day folded into evening. Priya extracted deletions and stitched a chronology tighter than memory. Helena built a wall of paper out of public filings. It had the shape of something you could not walk around. Adrian took calls on a headset and used words that did not happen in my house. Predicate acts, wire fraud, exploitation, without letting them swallow the rest of the room. At home night carried its familiar weight. I fed the cat, watered the plant, Lily says I overwater, and stood at the kitchen sink with my hands braced on its rim until the porcelain recorded the heat of my palms. The clock in the hall insisted on being itself. I went to bed, woke at 3, slept again, woke at 5, because morning is persistent. By 10, I was back at the office. Helena had been there long enough to have a different shirt on. County clerk stamped 2 more liens overnight, she said, sliding a printout toward me. Small numbers individually scary together. This is a tower held up by receipts. Priya wheeled in her chair. Found something new. On the monitor, a thread of messages between Connor and a number saved as V, with no further adornment. The tone was different, no scheduling, no logistics. Move faster, the messages said in varieties of blunt. Window closes. Then a final line, no loose ends. Adrian's jaw tightened. Helena. I know, she said, already dialing. We need a federal set of eyes. She reached a man whose voice arrived through the speaker like a door opening in a cool hallway. She introduced herself, then Adrian, then me, with a care that made the introduction feel like a promise. She did not use the word victim. When Agent Rowan Pierce arrived, he looked like someone who had walked upstairs instead of taking an elevator. He read the wall of paper without moving his mouth. He listened to the summary the way Helena had listened to county records, like the act of listening was a craft. We've been watching Caravelli, he said finally. Your materials are clarifying. He asked Priya about hashes and chain of custody as if he liked those phrases. He made a note when Adrian said the words elder exploitation and did not look at me when he did, which was a kindness. Pierce did not promise anything pretty. He asked practical questions: who had access to the tablet, whether Lily and Connor shared devices, which relatives might confirm the ledger amounts if approached discreetly. He requested duplicate copies and left with them in a messenger bag that had seen more rooms like this than I ever would. After he was gone, the office breathed out in an almost invisible way. You'll hear from him. Helena said, not as assurance, but as a weather report. In the afternoon, Marion phoned me back from her kitchen with the window open. I could hear the sound of a bus breaking children on scooters. Lord L, she said after I asked if we could come by that evening. What a thing. She didn't ask for details. She told me to bring my appetite and a level head, both of which I promised and only one of which I owned. We spent that evening at Marion's table, not presenting a case, so much as steadying a sister, while a line on a spreadsheet became a date she remembered, and a check she still had a photocopy of because she keeps everything. She looked at the photocopy a long time, then set it down and folded the dish towel in her hands into something tight and careful. All right, she said, do what you have to, what you have. Ben answered on the first ring and said, I knew that story felt wrong, and then apologized for saying story like that. Ruth texted back 3 words that were like a hand on my shoulder. Whatever you need. Back at Adrian's office the next morning, Priya had connected the ledger to a rhythm that looked like breathing just-in-time infusions ahead of debt calls. Fresh invoices to companies that existed only on paper. New investors invited to old problems. Helena stitched newspaper clippings to corporate registries until a name from 3 years ago sat beside a parcel from last month and made unfortunate sense. Midday Agent Pierce returned. He did not sit. Caravelli's network is moving money out at pace, he said. We're adjusting. If Mr. Bloom is entangled, he's not just a nuisance to you, he's a liability to them. The room held very still. Pierce's gaze rested on me for the first time, as if taking a measurement he hadn't needed until now. We're going to reach out, he said to Adrian and Helena, discreetly. Overseas, away from the children. He looked back at me. You will be kept outside any operational details, Ms. Hart. That's not a slight, it's protection. I understand, I said. The truth sat quietly beside the words. He left with the efficiency of someone who recognizes the size of his own footprint. Evening slipped over the city like a coat shrugged on too quickly. Lights came up in office windows. The river turned to slate. In the hallway, the night custodian hummed something tuneless and comforting. Helena checked her phone once, then again. Priya capped a marker and uncapped it and capped it without noticing. Adrian stood at the window, hands in his pockets as if practicing a posture for uncertain weather. My phone buzzed on the table. a number I didn't recognize. The message was short, unsigned, practical as a switch being thrown. Contact made. The text sat on the screen like a switch thrown in a dark room. Contact made. Adrian glanced at my phone, then at the window where dusk had turned the river to a band of pewter. He didn't ask who had written it. Helena was already on her feet, the canvas bag over her shoulder when the landline rang. She put it on speaker. Pierce came the voice as calm as a hallway. "We saw your message," Adrian said. "Approach completed." Agent Rowan Pierce replied. Mr. Bloom was contacted at his hotel. He denied, then reviewed material. He is providing access to accounts and comms. Mrs. Bloom and the children were not present. I exhaled without remembering I'd been holding my breath. What about the girls, I asked? They were on a guided tour, Pierce said. They remain unaware of operational details. We've put discreet coverage in place. A return has been arranged. When Adrian asked, "Tomorrow," Pierce said. "Direct. Arrival 10:02 a.m. Local processing to follow." The call ended with the tidy click of a chapter break, but the room stayed open, full of machines and paper and possibility. Priya closed her laptop with a gentle palm. "We're ready," she said to no one in particular and all of us at once. I slept in little notes that night, waking on the half hour to stare at the ceiling fan and follow its blades until they looked like something else. Dawn made the kitchen a pale square. I buttered toast and did not eat it. At 9:40, Helena shook my hand in the lobby of a building with windows that reflected the sky so precisely it made you feel like weather. Agent Pierce met us at the elevator. "They've landed," he said simply. Through a pane, I saw Lily's hair, first messier than the postcard version, her face without the layer of charm she adds for public view. Connor walked beside her with the untidy gait of a man who had slept sitting up. Mia and Tessa stayed close to each other, their rolling suitcases tilting and writing like small animals on leashes. A woman in a gray suit introduced herself as a counselor, spoke the girls' names like they mattered, and guided everyone toward a corridor. Pierce led me to a conference room with a long table, a pitcher of water, and a box of tissues placed kindly and without comment. "Mrs. Hart," the counselor asked. "I'm Dr. Elaine Morgan. I'll be present. We'll keep this contained." Contained felt like the right word. The door opened. Tessa entered first, then Mia, then Lily and Connor. For 1/2 second, everyone forgot how to be composed. "Grandma," Tessa said, and her voice went small in a way I remembered from night terrors and feverish naps. She crossed the room before anyone could stop her and folded into me like a bird into reeds. Mia came slower, chin set, eyes shiny in a way that meant she'd promised herself not to cry and had changed her mind. I held them both, felt their hearts tapping through their sweaters, and then lifted my gaze to my daughter. Lily's hands were knitted together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Mom," she said. Just that. Not a story, not a suggestion, not a performance. We sat, the girls on either side of me. Lily across Connor next to her, his shoulders angled in a slight tilt as if bracing for weather that does not respect umbrellas. Dr. Morgan spoke first, voice even. "This conversation is about family matters," she said, "not law enforcement. There will be time for other procedures." She nodded to me. I poured water I did not drink and set the glass down twice. "At the airport, I said to Lily, you told me you'd left my ticket at the house." She nodded once. "That wasn't true," I said. "No," she answered, voice rough. "It wasn't." Mia turned to her. "You said there was a mix-up." "There was no mix-up," Agent Pierce said, from his place at the wall, not imposing, and not absent a fact in a tie. "Your grandmother transferred $35,000 to your parents. Your parents took the funds and made sure she could not travel with you." Tessa made a sound I had only heard from her once before when her hamster died, and she had insisted on holding its small body for a minute after we'd said goodbye. She didn't cry now. Her breath went shallow and precise, like someone learning to count backward. "Why?" Mia asked. "Oh, yeah, simple as chalk." Lily looked at her hands. "Because your father asked me to," she said, "and it was more complicated than that, and also entirely that." Connor's jaw moved like a muscle he had forgotten to use. He began and then stopped because there are sentences that throw up roadblocks you cannot drive around. Mr. Bloom, Agent Pierce said, not unkindly. "There will be venues for your explanations. Right now we're dealing in plain terms." Mia stared at him. Is he arrested?" "No," Pierce said. "He is cooperating in an ongoing matter that does not concern this room. That part stays out there." He gestured vaguely toward the rest of the floor, then lowered his hand. "Here we are focusing on what happened to your grandmother and to other relatives." Dr. Morgan shifted slightly, a counselor's minimal choreography that puts attention back where it belongs. "Mia, Tessa," she said, "you are allowed to feel however you feel. You also get to ask questions. You don't have to fix your parents' faces." Tessa's fingers had found the hem of my sleeve. She said nothing. Mia breathed in and out as if she'd found the metronome. I turned to Lily. "Your tablet was in my bedroom," I said. I saw everything, the ledger, the emails, the transfers. She closed her eyes and the first tear, purely salt, nothing performative, slid out of one and left a clean track. You hurt me, I said. The table made my voice sound oddly clear. You did it on purpose. And it wasn't the first time you took from family. That ledger had names I love in it. I know, she whispered. Mrs. Bloom, Adrian said, from his chair near the end of the table where he had sat as a quiet witness. Until now, you have separate counsel. We'll speak after this meeting about restitution and conditions. For now, I need you to acknowledge the events without narrative. Lily's mouth opened, closed. She nodded. I took it, she said. We took it. Mia's head turned sharply toward Connor. Did you make Mom do it? No, Connor said. I asked. She agreed. He stopped again. We did this. It wasn't an absolution and it wasn't enough, but it was the first sentence that fit the room. We were given a moment, then not by design, but because the air seemed to order it. Tessa slid closer until her arm was pressed along mine from wrist to elbow, both of us finding the geometry that had comforted her since she was small. Mia held on to the back of her chair with both hands, as if she were on a bus that had taken a curve too fast. Agent Pierce cleared his throat minimal. Mr. Bloom, he said, please come with me. Connor stood, hesitated, and looked at the girls. I'll see you later, he managed, and followed Pierce through the door. The room did a little thing with silence and then set it down. Dr. Morgan took charge of the arc without letting it feel like a program. She asked the girls to name 3 things in the room that were blue. She had them follow her finger with their eyes. She told them she had snacks in her bag, and this was not bribery, it was nutrition, and they both accepted the crackers like they were ordinary. Lily watched, then wiped her face with a tissue, like a person learning to use a new tool. When we stepped into the hall a half hour later, everything beyond this family resumed. Phones rang, people moved. A door at the far end opened and closed without ceremony. The world kept doing what it does when it isn't in our specific crisis. By afternoon, we were in a different building with carpet that muffled decisions, sitting before a judge, whose expression did not change whether she said good morning or petition granted. Adrian spoke not performative, just exact. Dr. Morgan spoke careful with the word stability. Lily's attorney, Vanessa Xiao-Crisp, suit-steady eyes, said no contest before the judge could ask for a position. Temporary guardianship to Ms. Hart for a period of 6 months, the judge said. Visitation to Ms. Bloom, as specified and supervised as necessary. This is not punitive, it is protective. She looked at Lily for 1 full second and then at me. The children's well-being is the priority in this room. The gavel did not make a dramatic sound. She simply tapped a stack of papers into alignment as if to illustrate what order looks like when held in human hands. We exited into a corridor where the fluorescent lighting made everyone's skin look honest. Lily leaned toward me. Can they stay with you tonight? She asked, and the adverb tonight sounded like a piece of language she'd borrowed. Yes, I said. Mia's face creased. What about the house? There are logistics, Adrian said gently. We'll help navigate. That evening, an agent I didn't know by name walked through my little house with a checklist and a device that looked like a radio that had opinions. He handed me a card with a number to call if the world ever went sideways. We placed the girls' suitcases against the wall near the hall table, where the bowl for keys and the little dish for paper clips both lived like they had always been roommates. Mia took the small bedroom that had been the sewing room, and, before that, a nursery, and Tessa unfolded the couch in my office with the care of a person installing something fragile. The cat watched with the suspicion cats reserve for furniture that behaves unpredictably. We did the plain things, laundry, a grocery list. The argument about whether cereal counts as dinner. I said yes, if it's the good kind, and followed it with fruit. Mia texted someone a short explanation about family stuff and placed her phone face down without silencing it. Tessa found the photo album with Lily's 3rd grade picture and did not open it. When it was dark and the house had learned the shape of our voices in it, I stood in the hallway between their rooms, doors partly open, lamps low, the soft chaos of teenage belongings beginning to announce themselves, a hairbrush on a windowsill, a sweatshirt draped over a chair, the charge cable falling to the floor like a thin rope. The cat trotted past carrying nothing but purpose. Grandma, Tessa said from the couch, not sleepy. Are you going to be here when I wake up? Yes, I said, I'm not going anywhere. Even if Mom... She stopped there, the noun too heavy for a sentence that was trying to be a question. Even if I said, in the morning, life obeyed its own clock again. School called to say we could bring them tomorrow if we wished. The counselor had already communicated the necessary parts. Helena texted a single word steady and a check mark. Vanessa forwarded a schedule of Lily's obligations therapy community service intake, the first wire to a restitution account. Adrian sent a note asking if the plant looked overwatered, and I sent back a photo of a fern that cannot decide how to behave. A week folded itself into a rhythm that did not pretend to be normal. The girls learned the route to the bus stop I preferred, and the alternative I didn't. I learned that Mia drinks her tea so strong it looks like insistence, and Tessa leaves cups in 2 places and is prepared to discuss it. Lily came by for scheduled hours, arriving with a paper bag of muffins or an apology or both. And sitting on the couch where Tessa slept, careful not to cross invisible lines the girls were making on the fly. On the 4th evening, Mia stood at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood. "Did you know at the airport?" she asked. "Did you know it was on purpose?" "No," I said. "I knew at home with the tablet. Before then, I believed what I was told." She nodded once, a small economy of motion that looked older than she is. "Okay. Do you want to be angry?" I asked. "I am," she said, "and tired." We stood there together, not correcting the math. Tessa found the old mixing bowls and asked if I still knew how to make the cinnamon bread she liked when she was little. We measured the way bread requires you to and learned that my oven runs hot, and she prefers lighter crusts, and then we pulled 2 loaves from the rack and looked at them as if bread were a kind of answer. We ate warm slices at the table with butter sliding into the soft, as if it had plans. Tessa pressed her palm to the cutting board. "It smells like Saturdays used to," she said. Later, I heard the whisper of their voices in the hall bathroom, the way siblings whisper when they're negotiating mirror space and grief. One laughed for the first time since the airport room. The sound went through the house like a small mainspring re-engaging. On Sunday, the doorbell rang and Adrian stood on the porch with a brown paper bag that turned out to be tomatoes and basil from a friend's garden and a stack of folders in his other hand. He cooked with me without fanfare. The girls rolled their eyes at the idea of a salad and then ate it standing up in the kitchen, forks stolen from the drawer like small pranks. Adrian talked about nothing important, how the river looked 2 shades lighter after rain, how the bakery on Maple had changed ownership and the croissants were different now, and the girls listened like people falling asleep to a radio. When he left, Mia said, "He's not like a lawyer on TV," and I said, "No," and Tessa said, "He chops like a chef," and I said, "He does." That night, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel like empty. I set 2 glasses of water on the girls' nightstands with the same care I used to fix a hem, then turned off the hall light and sat in the old chair between their doors. The wood had a notch in the arm from years of rings and books. I put my hand over it and let the room settle. Mia's breathing evened out first, and then Tessa's, and then the cat chose my lap like a solved problem. Somewhere downtown, papers were being filed in rooms that like to keep their temperature at 71 degrees. Phones were ringing with voices that preferred fax to noise. Somewhere else, a man I had known for 20 years was in a room with other men telling them things they didn't want to hear. Here the girls slept. When I finally stood, the house made its small nighttime sounds, a baseboard tick, the refrigerator's sigh, the distant shush of a car taking the corner 2 blocks over. I turned the lock on the front door, then again out of habit, and placed the spare set of keys where the girls would see them in the morning. I went to my own room and did not turn on the lamp. The quilt waited. The clock in the hall counted. I lay down in a bed that had been an anchor and allowed myself one long breath in the shape of the day we'd had, then let it out slow enough that the dark did not push back. 2 months after the girls moved in, the house learned our new weight. The front door stuck less in the morning. The cat stopped policing the hallway at night. Mia labeled the pantry shelves with painter's tape and tidy block letters. Tessa left pencils in the windowsill like a trail of small flags. Lily arrived 3 afternoons a week on time, paper cup of coffee in hand, as if punctuality could apologize. She signed where Vanessa told her to sign, met with the therapist whose office smelled like eucalyptus, and transferred the first repayments without a quiver in her pen. Marian texted me a photo of a bank notification with a single word received, and later sent a second interest too. Ben emailed a scan of a canceled check and included a joke about finally believing in scanners. Ruth mailed a card with nothing but a sticker that said, "Paid," and a smile drawn beside it, off-center and determined. Connor disappeared from the visible clock. Agent Pierce said little and called it work. At a meeting in a room that liked to keep things at 71 degrees, a liaison from the Marshal's Service explained to the girls without sharp edges that their father would be relocated. "He may communicate rarely, and through us," she said, palms open. "He will be safe." The word safe landed with a soft thud in the middle of the table and did not move. Mia took the information into her jaw. Her mouth went quiet. Her feet didn't. She started running a loop around the block at dusk, cheeks bright breath measured. Tessa stayed near. She followed me from kitchen to mail slot and back sleeve, brushing my hip, a rhythm as old as the way she used to hold my finger crossing the street. On the morning the move took place, there was a single call on a secure line. It lasted the length of a song. Connor looked like his own stand-in hair, trimmed differently steel frames where there had been none. He said each girl's name as if it were a new thing he'd been handed and was afraid to drop, then looked past the camera at a point none of us could see. Afterward, the liaison collected the tablet and left with a nod that meant process complete. Routine built itself around school bell times and a list on the fridge. Mia joined a physics club that met before classes in a room with a view of the football field. Tessa signed up for spring choir, kept the program folded under her pillow, and humming drifted down the hall at odd hours like a bird that had wandered indoors and decided to practice. Lily changed in visible increments. The expensive polish gave way to flats and ponytails. She took a part-time position at a nonprofit that helped families visiting relatives at the county facility, forms phone calls directions to vending machines that wouldn't eat quarters. She didn't narrate it to me. I learned it the way you learn the shape of a chair you sit in often. Adrian came by most Sundays with awkwardly handsome tomatoes and a fresh stack of folders. He made sauce with the patience of a person accustomed to waiting for documents to load. The girls treated him like furniture you trust, sat on the arm of the couch near him, asked him where the nutmeg was, quizzed him on state capitals with a cruelty only teenagers and bar trivia hosts can muster. He lost gracefully and washed dishes. Spring arrived the way it always does here, mud tulips a week of indecision. Choir night came tucked into the middle of it. The school smelled like dusted matting boards and floor wax. Programs were handed out by a senior in a bow tie that wanted to be ironic. The stage lights made every student's face look newly minted. Tessa found us in the crowd, Mia with her hair pulled into a knot that meant do not fuss, Lily a row back fingers laced to stop them from fussing anyway. Adrian beside me tie a little crooked because he'd fixed a cabinet hinge just before we left. Tessa squeezed my hand hard enough to call it a message. "Don't blink," she whispered, then joined her section. They began with something in Latin that sounded like stone worn smooth. Then a folk song that moved like a small boat in a harbor, then a piece the director introduced with a speech about resilience that the students tolerated with practiced dignity. Tessa was a quiet singer. Her strength was the way she watched the conductor and made the line between them exact. At intermission, a man in a plain suit and school-appropriate smile approached me near the trophy case. He kept his voice low. "Mrs. Hart, authorized delivery." He handed me an envelope I recognized by its careful construction. No return address. The seam reinforced the weight light as medicine. Cleared at 1600, he said, and was gone into the crowd of parents talking about parking. I folded the envelope into my bag and waited until the lights dimmed again. When the last note of the last piece finished and the applause finally found its proper volume, Tessa ran down the aisle with her folder cheeks, bright hair escaping its barrette in celebratory wisps. I steered her toward a back hallway where the noise softened and handed her the envelope without commentary. She knew. She didn't ask if she could. She slid a nail under the flap, unfolded the single sheet, and read. The paper made a sound like a coat being lifted from a hook. Her face changed in the way faces do when actual oxygen hits a place that's been tight for months. She pressed her lips together. She didn't cry. "Is he okay?" Mia asked, not looking at the paper, looking only at Tessa. "He drew something," Tessa said. Small smile starting. She showed us the corner, a sketch of a tiny choir on a page. Dots for heads, triangle mouths, open stick, arms lifted. On the bottom, a sentence, "Heard you sing," even before the song. She folded the paper once, then again slid it back into the envelope and put it inside the program, as if the music itself had been given a lining. Outside, the air was that April temperature that can't commit. We walked to the car in our own weather systems. Lily fell into step beside Tessa, but didn't reach for her hand. Mia drifted to one side and spoke to Adrian about the speed of sound in gymnasiums, and he gave her the answer she already knew, which is the right way to answer a smart girl's question. Summer counted its days in library receipts and sunscreen caps. Guardianship reviewed itself in a courtroom with a clock that ran a minute fast. The judge asked the girls where they wanted to be. They said it plainly. Lily nodded. No one raised a voice. Connor's letters came twice more, each short. Each cleared, each bearing a sentence that made room where there hadn't been much. The marshals forwarded them with bulk mail's peculiar devotion to wrinkling corners. Mia kept hers in a locked box, along with a trophy she claimed wasn't important. Tessa nested hers inside the choir program and removed it to iron once with the lowest setting the way I taught her to respect paper. In August, Marion held a cookout and oversalted the corn. Ben brought a chessboard and taught Mia a defense she pretended not to understand until she used it on him and won 2 moves later. Ruth hugged Lily longer than either of them anticipated, and then made a joke about paper goods in bulk that landed right where it should. The case against Caravelli shifted from rumor to docket entries. I learned details the way weather arrives through windows I didn't open on the radio at a volume I didn't turn up. Adrian didn't bring reports, he brought peaches. When the peaches were gone, he brought plums. He left with a pie he hadn't asked for and a thank you he didn't require. One year after the airport, we sat at a small table near the window of a cafe that remembers its regulars. Mia had spread brochures across the extra chair like a quilt. Tessa had a pencil tucked behind her ear and sheet music peeking from her backpack. Lily arrived late from the nonprofit with a name tag still pinned on. She took it off and put it in her pocket without announcing why. Adrian stirred his coffee with the distracted precision of a person measuring out a thought. We ate almond cakes that fell apart in a pleasant way and talked about nothing that required a folder. That night, after the dishwasher made its contented end-of-cycle sigh, I checked the locks and turned off lights and stood in the doorway between the girls' rooms. Mia had a book face down on her chest and a calculus problem half sketched on a sticky note. Tessa slept with one hand on her choir program. The house released a small breath. I sat on the back steps with a blanket over my knees. Somewhere a train made the sound trains make when they are working at an hour that does not require witnesses. The yard smelled like tomatoes at the edge of ripeness. Inside the letter lay under a magnet on the fridge, not visible exactly, but locatable like a heartbeat under a palm. I stayed until the blanket gathered the cool and the porch light attracted a single moth that could not decide whether glass was sky. Then I went and set the alarm and let the quiet settle around the edges the way water finds its level. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.